Hey guys, welcome to another week of the Two Guys on Politics podcast. I'm Brian Broeking, and with me this week we've got.
Welcome, my fellow Americans. This is Bill Lipinski with some news and comments.
And I want to welcome my fellow Arab Americans to the show because I know there are a lot of them that are listening to us.
Oh, good. I'm very happy to hear that.
And I'm Ray Hanania. So we got two good topics that we're going to talk about. One is Biden's plan to forgive student loans, and we have an interesting discussion that Brian's going to lead with us about income inequality distribution fallacy. So we will get into that. So Bill, Brian, you're a young person. I'm sure you're ready to cash in those massive student loans. Were you one of the students that just racked up all that money to go to school, hoping that it would just be waved away and erased?
I was lucky enough to have two parents who saved for my college education and helped me get through. So I actually didn't have any debt or take anything out. So
do they still have parents like that do that actually save for their kids? I mean, rather than waiting for the government to cover everything?
You know, one of the interesting clips that's been moving around social media and throughout since this got announced was this parent from Iowa talking to Elizabeth Warren before the 2020 election cycle when she was still running against Biden for the Democratic nominee. And he comes up to her and says something along the lines of like, so you're trying to cancel all student loan debt? She says, yes, that's my goal. No student loan debt. And he goes, so what does that mean for parents like me who were responsible, put the money away for my kid to go to school? She says, good for you. And I think that is the biggest punch in the face to responsible Americans that we can see. I was obviously lucky to not take it out. And I understand there are problems with the current system, but we, one, didn't solve any of these problems with what we did here or what Biden did here. But two, it's just a punch in the face to hardworking Americans who actually saved for their children's education.
I agree. Bill, what do you think?
Well, I would just like to mention right now that last night I saw ABC News 5:30 broadcast here in Chicago, and they interviewed three individuals who were so very, very happy that they were going to get $10,000 off of how much money they owed for their tuition. And they haven't had to pay anything for several years because it's been frozen by Trump and by Biden. And two of these people have managed to buy houses in that period of time. And the third one has managed to buy a condominium. And now they're going to get another $10,000 off of their tuition bill. They're making out like bandits. It's a wonderful country, isn't it?
Oh my gosh. I remember after one of the reasons besides my draft number was going to get called, I enlisted in the Air Force during the Vietnam War towards the end of it, before Kissinger announced that, hey, we won, everything's over. I enlisted. And one reason I did that was because by me serving the country, I was going to be rewarded by the military. They were going to give me the GI Bill to pay for my education. But even then, my father had passed away and my mom had worked and saved money and used that money to help pay the balance of the education. So I got education that I appreciated because so much was put into it, by our parents, just like Brian's parents. They worked hard for that money. They set that money aside for you. It's just, to me, it's terrible that they're going to do this. It sends the wrong message. We're teaching our kids, hey, get a credit card, rack up $30,000 in debt. And then if you can't pay it, buy whatever you want to do. But if you can't pay it, you can always file bankruptcy, or you can hire one of those companies to negotiate it down. That's not what we should be teaching our kids.
Yeah, it's this idea that we don't respect or, we don't approve of people following the rules anymore. We lobby, we build these rules into society. And then as soon as something tilts it a little bit, we're ready to change everything. This is what the Democrats have been doing for 3 years now. They've campaigned on giving $1,000 checks, $600 checks. Trump did it too. Both sides of the aisle have basically slowly been giving away government assets to pay for these different programs without solving any of the issues. I know a handful of friends who have, since they've frozen all the interest payments and all that different stuff, they've stopped paying at either $10,000 or $20,000 increment on their public loans. Why? Because they've talked about it for 2 years now, and it's been frozen, so there's no reason to pay. And these are people making, good salaries. There's no reason to incentivize this. I don't see the benefit here.
Well, did you folks notice, prior to yesterday when Biden made this announcement, all you would see on radio, TV, in the newspapers are these stories about these two poor people who went to get an education, and now they owe hundreds of thousands of dollars. And how are they ever going to pay that off? So, we really should forgive them their tuition bills. Now, how do you wind up owing hundreds of thousands of dollars by simply going to college? That's what I don't understand. But that's the news media was obviously in cahoots with the government wanting to give away this money to people because you heard these terrible stories. But I really don't understand it. I know what did it cost to go to Wisconsin for an out-of-state student? Brian?
It was up from my freshman to my senior year of school. It raised $10,000. So I think it started at maybe 22 a year for out of state, and then it was 32 by the end for tuition.
So if you took a loan for 4 years and didn't pay a penny, at the end of that, you'd owe probably $200,000, right?
A little less, like probably 150. But yeah, I mean, then that's not even including this whole new emphasis to not just go to a 4-year college, but to go to grad school. If you go to grad school after that, they are right when they talk about this. And this is the fundamental problem that this whole student loan refinancing giveaway hasn't solved is people are required to go to school until they're 30 and then take out loans for it. And then they spend all of their 30s and 40s paying it off. It's a misaligned incentives that weren't fixed in this.
One of the things Biden is not talking about, and I was listening to Susan Rice, who was Obama's person many years ago, and she was not talking about this either. And that is that students who couldn't afford, to have money, whose parents were poor, got grants. They got free money. They got scholarships that were taxpayer funded to put them through school. And on top of that, they also borrowed some money to, strengthen whatever it was that they were doing. So this idea that this is helping the lowest income students who had to struggle is really not true. These are my first child, my daughter, went to school over 20 years ago at DePaul. It was very expensive. But when she got out, she was motivated to work, to find a job, knowing that she had to pay that off. And I thought it made her a better person by being responsible for it. I before the show, I was talking to Bill about the real problem is what's not being addressed. And that is the system of how the money is, manipulated by these banks. That some of these banks, they consolidate these loans and nobody controls what they do. So in the case of my daughter, she consolidated her loans from graduate school and or from her DePaul and then graduate school. And the bank took the interest up front during the 20-year period, requiring the principal to be paid at the very end so they would get their money. Those are the things that should be addressed and that would have saved a lot of money rather than just saying, hey, you don't need to pay that money. And she's still paying it, and she's paying it. But the other thing is, listen, at school today costs, I think my son, he's a senior now, it's $42,000 a year to go to school. Now that comes from my money, some grants that he gets, some loans that he's received. But when he gets out, he will pay those loans off because it makes, I think, him a better person to be responsible and to take care of yourself.
Yeah, I agree with that in general. But one thing I guess I'll push back on or say is a different setup is, when you talk about going to college in the 80s versus now, the cost has exploded. If you actually look at the President Biden fact sheet for this whole thing, you can see that. So in 1980, the average four-year university cost was about $8,000. And the Pell Grant, which is like the major grant that they're giving students money back on, was about $6,000. And since then, now the average Pell Grant is still $6,000 per student, but the average cost is $22,000. So we basically 3x'd in a 40-year period. So the question is, has college gotten 3 times better in that time? And what percentage of that is actually just inflation, and what percentage of that is bloat? Because you can see these colleges have gotten massive bureaucracies built around them. You can see in 1998, the average four-year university had 5 non-instructional people per 100 students. It has doubled to 10. What do those people do? I'm not entirely sure. And I think it's something that should have been addressed in this, and we should fight that battle as well, is we send these monies to these sinkholes. You can, as a Democrat, you'll go through and through being, I dislike the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. We're sending these monies to these defense contractors and these different people, and it's a black hole. This is the same thing. This is a black hole money pit that we've never patched up. And we should fight to kind of hold ourselves accountable on both sides.
I don't know if either one of you recognized the name Henry Beanan. He was the president of Northwestern University for about 15 years. And I got to know him very, very well. And we often would discuss college tuition and all the money being, in colleges and universities, and how many professors they could hire and how many more classrooms they could add. And he was saying that all occurred because the federal government started pumping more and more money into higher education in this country. That the universities were just, they were drowning in money, but they were not taking it off of the tuition. They were building more buildings. They were hiring more professors. They were paying more money to professors. So he really felt that all the money that came from the federal government is what caused the tremendous acceleration in tuition for students.
See, I think part of the problem goes back to something that Brian pointed out, which I think was a good example, the Pell Grants. You're right. It would cost $8,000. When I went to school, it was about less than that, and I could get about $6,000. I could have gotten a Pell Grant for about $4,000. But you're right, the cost went up so dramatically, but the Pell Grant stayed the same. But that's not just in education. That's at every level in our society. When we talk about what is the poverty level in the United States, that poverty level has been the same for the last 35 years. Meanwhile, the cost of living has gone up so dramatic. We've never adjusted it. And the reason for that, special interests. There are special interests in the education industry, in the insurance industry. You could go through the whole spectrum of all these different industries. They want more money. And the idea that why should I let the colleges and universities that charge so much off the hook, let them deal with the cost. Let them go to the donors. Let them figure out a way to pay back some of these loans for their students that they graduated. Why did they just give out so many loans? It's like the mortgage industry. I think it would have been better. I sent you guys a link about how the estimate of this could range between $300 billion and $980 billion for what Biden is proposing to do. Why not take that money and give it to homeowners to eliminate? Why not buy my mortgage? What's the difference between me and a student? I'm struggling, I'm working. There's so many people that have mortgages that can't get good jobs. Why is it that? And what about senior citizens? Who's going to help the senior citizen? Why isn't there a program for us to give us money so we can live, on that meager Social Security that they've been taking?
I was going to say, that is called Social Security.
Yeah, but they never increased it. They kept taking more and more money out of me. And now they're talking about eliminating it. I never got the money that I deserve from all that money I poured into it. The point is, why this student loan program? And my theory is, we have an election coming up in November. He wants to appeal to young voters. He thinks that's going to help them. And everything that we've seen over the last 6 months has to do with what'll make the Democrats look better when they go into a midterm election where they're expected to lose the control of the House. What can they do to change that? And I think that's what this is all about.
I think that they are changing that. They passed 4 bills that are pretty good bills. That makes Biden look good. I think the abortion issue, even though I'm pro-life, I think the abortion issue is helping the Democrats also. It's got their activists very motivated so they can go out and campaign pro-abortion, plus in behalf of Democratic candidates. I really no longer am convinced that the Republicans are going to capture the House of Representatives in the midterm elections. I'm afraid that the Democrats may very well hold on to it. I'm already convinced that they will hold on to the Senate. And I think the Republican leader in the Senate is convinced of that also, because he was talking about the candidates that they wound up with as US Senate candidates. And that was primarily because of the Trumper getting involved in these elections in supporting people who would support him. So I believe after the midterm, we're still going to have a Democratic president, a Democratic Senate, a Democratic House. Now, hopefully, one of those 2 bodies will be close enough that the Democrats will not be able to run wild. But the Republicans have blown this, and the Democrats have moved very, very successfully to get themselves back into this ballgame.
Yeah, and the worst part about all this is the fundamental principle of the 2-party system is that you have accountability when you have 2 powers that are somewhat equal, that neither side can do what they want. That's the problem in Cook County. There's no 2-party system. The Republican Party is pretty much devastated. Their leadership is an embarrassment. I don't know if you saw the headlines last week where they slated all these candidates for office, and 7 of them just got thrown off the ballot over stupid technicalities that any good Republican leader would have recognized, but they didn't. So instead of having a 2-party system in Cook County, we have one party that decides everything that they want, and they end up electing people, in my opinion, like Kim Foxx and Mayor Lori Lightfoot, to do things that are more far left and never held accountable because there's no pressure on them. If that happens in the United States, that's the worst thing that could happen.
Is there any Republican party in the state of Illinois?
It's slow. This is a blue state for good reason. It's very hard to see a Republican resurgence if you can't, it isn't it, this, Bill, Illinois is divided. The Democrats have Northern Illinois, the Republicans have Southern Illinois. If the Republicans can't get a foothold in Cook County and Northern Illinois, they have no chance of doing anything. And we've seen DuPage County, which at one time was the biggest Republican county in Northern Illinois, turning Democratic over the years, and the same with Will County. So it's this accountability issue. I'd love to see the House become Republican, just so both sides are forced to come together and find consensus and eliminate this polarization. But if it doesn't happen, we're going to have polarization for a long time.
Yeah, ironically, I think that because I believe that the Democrats are going to hang on to the Senate, hang on to the House of Representatives. If they do not find anything really strong on Trump and they can't indict him and convince him, I believe that he'll give us divided government because he'll be the next president of the United States. We may very well have a Democratic House and Senate, but we'll have I won't call him a Republican because I don't think he is a Republican. He's simply an opportunist. He'll be the president. And Lord only knows how long he'll want to stay.
And that's a bad situation too. I agree with you.
Terrible situation.
That would be terrible. But I don't know if even if the House were close, 50-50, it would still be better than having one party dominating all 3, of the branches of government. That would be shocking.
I certainly agree with you. And so does
All right. Did you fill out your form, Brian, for the forgiveness of the student loan? Do you owe anything?
Listen, back to the 1960s. I think I might be able to get some money out of this from
yeah.
college.
Yeah, my loans. Can I go back and I want to be, if everybody's going to be considered, I want to. All right. So anyway, listen, the three of us and everybody listening are going to be the people paying for this.
Right.
That when Biden says he's forgiving these loans, all he's doing is saying, hey, Bill, hey, Brian, hey, Ray, I need you to up your money. I'm going to take your tax money and we're going to use it to bail these people out. And that's wrong. All right. Brian, this is so frustrating. Let's go to something a little more exciting, like the topic of income inequality distribution, the fallacy of it. Why is it a fallacy?
So I guess to kind of set up this idea, so in the Great Recession a decade ago, when a lot of these students were racking up big student loan debt, a big argument was, the growing division and problems in America are due to income inequality, which is measured by this thing called the Gini coefficient, which is essentially measuring the distribution of money in the quartiles of the US. So the top 20% all the way to the bottom 20%, and how much wealth is in each of those. And income inequality has always been this interesting issue where you can see it in two ways. The first way they see it, in the way that people that want to institute a wealth tax and different things like that, are it's a pie, a single pie, and we split it between all of us. That's how the government sees it. Why? Because the government takes X percentage of the income every year of Americans and then distributes it by giving services. But that's not how our economy works, and it's not how capitalism efficiently is supposed to work. The pie can grow, and that's what startups and entrepreneurs and different people do in the economy. So kind of what I wanted to discuss and set up was what is stopping startups and those different things in society from getting this push, because we see these ideas and these attacks on wealth, right? Attacks on Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, these different wealthy individuals. But the difference is we look at the wrong incentives and the wrong ideas, right? Elon Musk has started a car company, a space company, a digging holes company, a neural implant company. These are positive, growing the pie gains for society, right? This is how the government grows, is because they can tax a bigger portion of the US GDP, which is grown by Elon Musk. And then there's the other half of it, where you have people like Wall Street and institutions where all they're doing is shifting money around. They're playing a zero-sum game. So I'm wondering what you guys think about how we can transition and promote more entrepreneurship and growth in wealth, and less zero-sum games of buying and selling on the stock market, or going to school and trading one for one there.
That's a very, very difficult question to answer. First of all, I don't see how it's possible. People keep talking about taxing the wealthy, taxing the wealthy. I don't know how much money you can wring out of the wealthy. So you have to grow the pie, as Brian just said. You have to be able to tax across the board. Now, maybe you tax the wealthy more than you tax, the joker that's making $80,000 a year or so, even though to me, $80,000 a year sounds like a pretty good salary, but I don't know if it is or if it isn't. According to what I have read, the last time we had such a differential between the wealthiest people and the poorest people in the country was in the 1920s. Now, is that possible, that the 1920s were that bad? And then we wound up going into the Depression. Things had to get even worse during the Depression, because I'm quite sure that people who had money had a better opportunity of shielding it, from the Depression than the poor guy that was working day in and day out, and living hand to mouth. How did we close the wage gap, the income gap, the wealth gap in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s? However we did it then is what we should try to apply now, if that would be possible.
So the interesting question with that is I actually don't think we want to close the wealth gap. I don't think it's good to do that because I think that's a net negative. So the reason, so this is coming from two articles I've read from Paul Graham, who's an entrepreneur out in Silicon Valley. He writes articles. He's run venture capital funds for decades now, very well known. So his kind of determination was it all changed in the 80s with the yuppies. So before then, we had this very, interesting structure of how companies and governments worked. And it was, these guys went to war, World War II. They had this very strict like ordering, private and then, all the way up to general. That transitioned into the workplace of the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, where me coming in as a 23-year-old, I'm paid less, even if I do more than the people older than me. There's no upward mobility, I just have to put in the time. And then 15 years later, I get my promotion and I stay there for my entire career. But this actually changed in the 80s with the yuppies, where people realized, wait, these young people can actually do things. They can promote, good business practices, make us a lot of money. Why aren't we paying them what they're worth? And then we make more money. So this whole kind of, hierarchy imploded almost, right? And that changed the way money was distributed, because with technology and different things like that, you're able to more leverage your intelligence, your, knowledge, your special skills, and make more money with that. So I think the question comes back to, we can see why the wealth gap closed then, but was that good? And are we going to be able to stop that now with the rate at which technology is advancing?
Yeah, I don't see it. I'm not much of an economist, I'll be honest with you. I know how to earn money and I know how to spend money and I know how to save money. But I've noticed over the years, when I was younger, our house cost $2,000. The wealthier house cost $4,500. The rich person that we knew had a house that cost $250,000. So as wealth and time went on, the wealthy, their wealth grew 10 times faster than the money of the poorer people. There was no equality in how the dollar would increase for both people. They would just skyrocket and we would go up, barely keeping up with inflation. So no matter what you make today, if you're in the middle class or lower middle class, you're basically making less, relatively speaking, than people made probably 20 or 30 years ago who were at the same economic level. We're actually losing money as you get lower down the rung of income. I think it's a system. We tend, and I think also government interference, where government spends money to cover things like we talked earlier about student loans. We use money for politics rather than managing money in a proper way to make sure that everybody has the same growth and for doing the same amount of work at whatever level you're at.
Well, Brian was saying he doesn't know if it's a good idea if we close the wage gap or not. Well, if we don't close the wage gap, the income level of people in this country, the very wealthy are going to be paying more and more into a welfare system to take care of those people who did not make money, are not making money. Because in this country, you're not going to allow anybody to starve. You're not going to allow anybody to go without a roof over their head. So you're going to see more and more socialism coming into this country than we've ever had before, unless you close that wage gap where the lesser salaried people still are making a sufficient amount of money to keep a real democracy going. I know Brian is a big believer in entrepreneurs. Well, we had a lot of entrepreneurs once upon a time by the name of Thomas Edison and Henry Ford and General Motors and US Steel. And somehow we managed to handle those people and also make a good living for what I will call the common ordinary man. We've got to do the same thing today. Otherwise, I do not believe you can keep this nation going the way it has been.
And I'd only add to what you just said by saying that instead of giving money to help people, we should be giving people opportunity to help themselves. And that always sounded like, oh, that's a racist way to deal with poverty, because people look at poverty in terms of race. But I don't agree. I think that what we've done is we've created a welfare state where we more and more take responsibility for the poor. And instead of helping them to get on their feet, we simply pay their debts. We simply give them free things. And if I were somebody who wasn't at the level that I was at, and I had to work harder to do something, I would say, why should I do that? I'll be happy to take 20,000 and live on it if they're going to give me a house. I don't need 100,000 or 200,000. Let them give me a car. Let them subsidize my son's education. I could sit back and enjoy life doing nothing because government is going to take care of me. And I may not eat steak every day. I may just eat some hot dogs every day, but I'm willing to do that because I don't need to work. I'll just take the money. I think that's one of the big problems that we have with all this. And I apologize, Brian, if I'm off track a little bit, but like I said,
it's only going to get worse. The more and more entrepreneurs you have, and the fewer and fewer ordinary citizens who are making enough money, to buy their house, buy their car, educate their children. I know Brian is an entrepreneur. He believes in that very, very strongly. I can understand that, but I do not believe you can have a real functioning democracy if you wind up with having these very, very wealthy people and all these other people, or so many of these other people, being on welfare. Once they're on welfare, they can be controlled.
I think this is specifically at this point in time in US history, a problem that will be solved in time, or could be solved in time, with technology and with advancement, right? So there's a lot of ways people become wealthy and a lot of ways people fall into poverty. Like, there isn't one path. I think that's the incorrect idea or incorrect opinion of, and that's where this pie fallacy comes from, is the idea that the wealthy got that way by stealing from the poor. And that's an incorrect way to view the way society works.
I don't want to be associated with that. I don't believe that. I believe the people who are very wealthy had a good idea. They worked very hard. They made a lot of money. I think that's fine. I have no problem with that. Go ahead.
So then what accelerates that, right? Realistically, we want more entrepreneurs and we want more people playing exponential games, right? Right now, we have this problem in society, and this is something I've thought about a lot, is there are too many people who are, educated at Harvard, Stanford, these top tier schools, and even, other good business schools going into finance. Why? Because one, finance is a zero-sum game at the end of the day, right? I buy from you, and you've either made money or lost money, and vice versa, right? We're not creating wealth, right? We're trading companies that create that wealth over time, right? Tesla creates wealth, but me trading on the stock market isn't creating wealth. So I think we need to shift this mentality where we incentivize exponential gains. Someone who makes me a table, or a carpenter, those kind of things, those are wealth creators because they could create more valuable homes. So what I think this actually goes into is we need to see not just, tech entrepreneurs as entrepreneurs. We need to label carpenters, electricians, all these people are entrepreneurs, because at the end of the day, what are they doing? They're creating wealth, they're creating value, they're creating the homes we live in, the parks we, enjoy. And I think that's the shift that we need to make. And the idea that we need to build on is, are they creating as much value as a tech entrepreneur? Probably not. But that's a world that we can live in where it's not, the 1% and everyone else dependent on the government. It's just levels of entrepreneurship.
First thing we'll say about that plan is that you're union busting. You want to get rid of the union. You want to make all these private contractors on their own. That's the first argument you're going to get on it. I know it. Would you allow these people, how can they be individual entrepreneurs if they belong to a union? They can't. So get rid of the union. I'm not so sure.
Agreed.
Let me ask you this question. I consider you an entrepreneur. You have several friends. Are all of them entrepreneurs too, or are they happy to be working, for someone else and being paid, a salary every week?
I consider most people I know more happy to take a, weekly salary, biweekly salary than it is, being an entrepreneur, because it's a different lifestyle. I mean,
it's easier too. It's easier,
yeah.
right?
Oh, it's way easier. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to work harder to keep my business on its feet than somebody who might work for me. All they have to do is what I expect of them. And once they're into that and they deliver, but I really think, just going back to the union thing, I mean, we know what the problems the unions have had. And I'm not sure that we've really solved all those problems. I'm a big union person, always supported the unions, but that doesn't mean that there hasn't been problems among the unions. I think this problem goes way beyond just economics, and it's the mixing of politics and special interests and paying exorbitant amounts, without any price controls on some things, that we've allowed things to skyrocket. How do we pay a guy $200 million to hit a baseball at a park, and now I have to pay $200 just to get a ticket and eat a hot dog and have a beer at Wrigley Field, with my son? It's too expensive. I can't afford it. Things have gotten out of whack, and that rose faster than my income rose. So I can't even keep up with the way things are going. Anyway, final thoughts, because we're kind of at the end of the roll here.
My final,
Go ahead.
Oh, Brian, go ahead.
All right. So my kind of final thoughts on this is, while you can like unions or not, I don't particularly think unions are good. Being from the tech industry that is, pretty well paid and not unionized, I think it is very important to, have the free market there. And I think anytime we have a non-free market entity, a union, interfering in the free market, we get inefficiencies and, bad results. So at the end of the day, I think we do need to create this idea that anyone can be an entrepreneur in this country, and the self-worth that you can create when you create value yourself rather than creating value working for someone else is immense. And I think we should promote that.
I think this country should promote everyone having an opportunity to have a comfortable lifestyle. Buy a home, buy a car, raise a family, okay? I don't think that we need to create any more leverage for the very, very wealthy. They're doing extremely well at the present time. They've always done very, very well. Unions help build this country. There was no middle class in this country really until after the Second World War, when we were so dominant economically and militarily that the unions finally could get a good, strong hold, because all these large corporations were making money hand over fist, and they could afford to pay their employees whatever they wanted to pay them. That's my soapbox for today.
All right, I'm Ray Hanania.
I'm Bill Lipinski.
And I'm Brian Broeking.
And this is Two Guys on Politics with our economics expert, Brian Broeking, because you've added, we can't do this show without mixing economics and politics. And I think it gives us a good balance. All right. Thank you guys and everybody out there for listening to us. We'll be back next week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks, guys.